Well, hello and welcome. Welcome to another episode of the Imperfect Men's Club podcast. My name is Mark Aylward, and once again, I'm here with my good friend, colleague, and co-host, Jim Gurley. And as we always do, Jim and I had a good, solid, lively pregame conversation, and it's worth mentioning that what we're going to do is connected to one of the most incredibly terrible things that we've experienced as Americans, and that's the fires going on in Southern California. And I think it bears mentioning that, just as a reminder, Jim lives in California, is a lifelong California resident, and I'm in Florida, originally from Massachusetts, but have spent 30 years in Florida. So imagine our different perspectives. I also recently experienced natural disaster, which certainly these fires are categorically, with my own daughters living in Asheville, North Carolina. Now, it wasn't a fire, but it was also devastating, and they were ill prepared. So I think the way we're connecting this, Jim, today, as we discussed, is a worldview of sorts, and within that big category of worldview is what we've referred to as our belief system. So really interested in this episode. Really looking forward to it, Jim. Pass the microphone over to you.
Yeah, like you said, you're trying to make sense of this horrible situation down in Southern California. I think I mentioned in the last episode. It's personal because I have some family members that have lost part of their house, which sounds good, but in some ways is bad because not only did they lose they lost all their neighbors, they lost their entire community in the Pacific Palisades, which if anybody's ever been there, is probably one of the most beautiful places in the country as far as a community and everything else. But yeah, that what we talk about, Mark, on this one. We are, of course, have our framework of the Imperfect Men's Club. Our tagline is "The imperfection is the perfection." As horrible as what's going on, we're trying to find some good, some meaning in this, and that's going to be a struggle, at least at the moment. But our framework that we created years ago when we started doing the podcast was consists of these 5 areas of our lives, right? And these 5 areas that we're going to talk about today would fall under worldview. I'll go through the other ones and we'll circle back to that. But the 5 areas are our profession, our health, mental health, physical health, our relationships with others. That's mothers, fathers, wives, brothers. Our relationship with money, and our relationship with the world, and that's under worldview. So, as I was preparing for today's talk, I started to look for other words that described what's going to go on, because what's happening in Southern California eventually is going to be part of a political narrative. And so I thought I'd start off by reading the meaning of the word belief system. So I think I put that on the screen. But why don't you kick that off with what that says, Mark, and then we'll get into this conversation. There's a lot to cover. So
Yeah, no, it's what I've got here. I think you pulled off of Google. Basically, is the purpose of a quote unquote belief system is to guide someone's values, actions, and worldview. It's how we make sense of the world and our place in it.
yeah, and there's so just go over my what I call my 5 W's: the what, why, who, when, where.
Mm-hmm.
What is a belief system? That's otherwise known as an ideology, a way of thinking. Uh, it's subconscious. It's a perspective, and yeah, I think the one thing about the framework we created is in the center is self, and that self is called self awareness. There's many other selves, but it's being self aware of our belief system, for good or for bad, and it's definitely something that can work in our favor, and it could work against us. But what I want to talk about, Mark, is just what do you think? Where do you think this is going in terms of? I'll just throw out the politics of that, especially in at the national level and the state level. I'll get into the California parts, but yeah, what are your thoughts, or what are you seeing on the news that gives you hope or um, discouragement as far as what it's going to take to either deal with these catastrophes, whether it's the flood in Northern California or Northern Carolina, or Southern California fires. What are your thoughts about where this is all going?
Well, I mean, obviously it's just humble me and what the hell do I know? But I think because of my connections to this, you're one of three or four people that I know pretty well that live in California, and have always lived in California, who I've spoken to. I live over here in Orlando on the East Coast, and I'm very close to, 11, I think, hurricanes that I lived through. And I see two things that go on consistently when catastrophes strike us nationally. And there's a national presence, and there's a state level, local level presence. And I don't know enough about the political dynamics to know long term what might influence what, but I know that we have a very strong governor here in Florida, and he gets a lot of stuff done. And I think I see two things going on. I think nationally speaking, we're getting tired of a lack of leadership, a lack of accountability. And I think on the state level, certainly in blue states, which California is definitely one, we're still showing signs of power and influence at the state level that might make it more difficult for the national influence to overcome it, because I think one side of this argument is talking about a lack of leadership and the other side's talking about climate change. And I think it's absurd.
Well, it certainly is. Again, I'm just trying to get some humor in how one person can see the exact same situation so differently. And this is a belief system, right? So I'll
Mm-hmm.
just start off with what I know here in California. We have a governor, a leader, and we have an elected official that's really controlled California for well over 50 years, that continues to go all in on one of their main missions, and that is to save the world from climate change. Right. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to try to say this with to be as balanced as I can, but I'll break down some facts. I think you'll be interested in going through this, because I know you're a fan of Governor Newsome. Um, and I think you've mentioned before you appreciate his hair and
I'd
his,
love to. I'd love to get in
and
the
his
ring with them.
and his integrity. So, but yeah, that guy, he's a piece of work. There's, I think,
Yeah.
anybody would say, but yeah. So yeah, just give you some background on a belief system really regarding, let's just say, policy. Right? There's at the federal level, at the state level, even at the local level. What is a government's role? Uh, Obviously, some believe that it goes way beyond what I think their initial idea was, or the initial concept was, for them to provide investment in infrastructure to produce, power, water, food services, safety, fire, police, for the greater good of the country. And in California, this goes all the way back to the 1900s. We were the best. In fact, some of the smartest people in the world would come from the east to the west, and created some of these facilities. Number one was the San Joaquin Delta, which was capturing water from the Sierras and rainwater, and then pushing that down into Southern California, which sort of changed the world. Right? It created Los Angeles. It created the Central Valley, which was the farmer to the world, um, and many other things. But that was after the gold rush, and that was a time of amazing innovation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And California's always been known for innovation. But just to give you an idea, that they haven't built a major water treatment facility, or um, it's not just the treatment centers, it's the housing the water, right? So California doesn't have a water problem, we have a water management problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll go through some statistics about how that demonstrates. But yeah, but that was in the 70s was the last time we did something like that, when there was a population of 20 million. We have 40 million now, but yet we have the same system that's trying to support this. So there is not a water problem in California. There's a water management problem in California.
Mhm.
And you'll probably ask, why is it that we can't get these facilities built, or why do we keep building homes next to force next to areas where they're high risk of fire? And that's because the environmentalists have stopped most of those projects because of their effort, or let's just say good intentions, we hope, to preserve a fish or a bird or whatever else, which is important stuff. But they clearly made a
Well,
decision that fish are more important than humans. And I hate to say it, but that's the result of what happened uh, just uh, just over a week ago.
well,
And
I won't bore us with looking up the definition of the word, but I would call it completely disillusioned, is what you've just described, and it is amazing how long he's been unfettered. He's been behaving in an unfettered fashion. No one's policing him. No one's been policing him. But I think that's going to come to an end. And we can take.
well, remember, it's not just him. It's the entire Democratic Party that have been in power uh, for the last 50 years. So he didn't
Mhm.
do all this on his own. This didn't happen just because of the Governor Newsome. It happened based on a belief system of many other politicians that were elected that have let this become what it is. And so, yeah, I don't think it's fair to blame it all on him, but clearly, um, the belief system that we're talking about today is has results, right?
Yeah. No, I'm not feeling poorly about blaming everything on him, but I understand your distinction.
Yeah. What's going to be interesting, I think you and I both have different positions on this. They're going to spin this. Both sides are going to try to spin this. One side's going to spin this that this is a climate crisis and that we have to deal with this, become more restrictive, to basically double down on what we've already done here in the last 50 years in California. And then that's the solution to the problem. When it's pretty obvious that it's actually the environmentalists and the lawsuits need to be minimized so we can make progress again. But there is going to be a vicious fight of these two belief systems. That one was climate change is what created this problem, and the only way to solve it is we deal with climate change. So less cars, less people, less everything. That's their ultimate goal. And
Well, Jim, one of the things that strikes me, and this is a little bit uh, macabre, I suppose, but forgive me, when things happen to us personally,
mhm,
sometimes we feel differently about our political views that we held previously when these things were in the distance, so to speak. And the things that I think of when I talk about that are things like rape,
mhm,
gun murders at schools.
mhm,
Like if I had a little kid and he was killed by a crazy person with a gun at school, would I feel differently about guns?
mhm.
Maybe. Why wouldn't I? And but what you're going through right now is touching people that it's never touched before. And as I said to you earlier, there's a lot of really wealthy people that have lost their homes. There's a lot of real, whether it's Hollywood related or celebrity related, there's a whole audience of people now that were untouched by this bullshit that are now touched by it. And I think that's going to have an impact.
Yeah, there's no question. I'll share. And again, this is not just the one percenters in the Pacific Palisades. This is everybody, or every, let's just say, level of society. My cousin's daughters, she was recently married. His family lost, and they live in I don't know exactly where the area is, but again, it's not the Pacific Palisades, and they lost two homes, and that's a family of like 10 that now are homeless. And
Mm-hmm.
I think just it's important to put that in perspective. Everybody thinks this is just in the nice areas. It's not just in nice areas. This
Yep.
has affected
Yep.
everybody. But here's one that'll. I guess you're gonna get. Don't be frustrated. Be fascinated. I don't find any humor in this. I think it's very sad. But think about this, Mark. Um, so I don't know what your experience has been in North Carolina, but my understanding is that the federal funds and or FEMA or whatever is it's not the money's not flowing like it I guess it should have. Um, well, already in Southern California, these people don't have a place to live, right? They're homeless. And These are working class people. So this is not the homeless. We've got plenty of real homeless that choose to be homeless because of decisions to do drugs, or sometimes not their decision, just bad luck. Um, but think about this: the somebody could break the law, obviously immigration, come into the country. Not only do we reward them by giving them a gift card, we give them a cell phone, a place to live, and free medical care. Right? They contributed zero to the system, but we did that for how many million people last year and the year
Mm-hmm.
before and the year before. And
Mm-hmm.
now these people that have paid taxes, that have served in the military, have done all these things for all these years, they won't get free rent. They won't get free medical. They won't get a gift card. Oh, they may get a gift card, but you know how that works out, right? But they won't get a free cell phone either. Um, and we're talking millions. That's the difference. I don't know what to think about it. I mean, you try to laugh about that, but that's not funny. But that just goes to show you uh, how out of
Well,
whack our policies could be. Um,
I think there's to tie it back to this idea of a belief system, a
mhm,
worldview. I think that, you've cited a couple of significant differences between what we would say maybe the far left belief system might be versus the far right. But when I see, and this is just recent, I see Newsome, I see the LA fire chief, I can't remember her name. I see the mayor, and then I see the one of the other leaders in the fire department. All of them are women, all of them are DEI hires. But more important than that, every single one of them, when they stepped up to a microphone, in my estimation, was immediately seeking the ability to blame someone or something else.
mhm,
And I think that, and I turned around and I watched a little bit of the Pete Hegseth nomination process, the Secretary of Defense. They're grilling the guy.
mhm,
And he didn't say anything about blaming anyone else or looking for anybody else for blame. He either took the blame himself as a bad decision, suggested it was somebody that wouldn't provide their name, so he doesn't value that information. But their immediate response from the right is, what can we do to fix this? How did this happen? And on the left, it's like, well, the local people are to blame, the fire chief's to blame, the governor's to blame, everyone's looking to point fingers at somebody else. The belief system difference to me is you're either personally accountable for your own well-being or you're not. And I
mhm.
think that's the biggest distinction that I see.
Yeah, like I said, it's an ideology. It's just fascinating to me how somebody could look at the same thing and see it completely different. Uh, and I guess the world's always been like this, but when you have such a tragic event like what's going down in Southern California, it comes to the surface, and you can really look at it. The question is, I get as I have is, can you change your belief system? Is that something over time that changes?
Yeah, I think that, yeah, it's a great question. I think that my personal opinion on that is that yes, you can. I certainly have. I'll just take a couple of examples from my life. Being a single father made me look at fatherhood very differently, made me appreciate motherhood, made me appreciate, there was all kinds of things. That was a major circumstance that had me change my belief system about a number of things, how to listen, what listening was, stop
Mhm.
talking so what it just there was a litany of things that changed because of that major circumstance. And I think that we're all entitled to change our belief system, but it has to be based on something factual,
Mhm.
data. Um, the circumstance has to create data. It's like, well, they don't have a mom to attend to their needs, so I have to fill that gap. That's a
Mhm.
fact. I can
Mhm.
choose to fill the gap or not, but the fact is they need me to, right? So it's like, okay, you're going to change your position on this big thing, Mr. or Mrs. Politician. Tell me why. Tell me the story of how that change in your belief system evolved. And if you can tell a good story that makes sense and you can support it with data, then I grant you my humble permission to change your belief system. In other words, I'll accept that change in your position, but not
Mhm.
just because the wind's fucking blowing, no pun intended, you know?
Yeah. 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 I guess, the question, and we cover this in our framework of the worldview, but where does your belief system come from, right? Where does the worldview come from? And we've talked about this. I think it really starts off in your childhood, right? So that's
Totally.
the time and the place. In your case, it was in the East Coast or the Boston area. In my case, it's um, Northern California, Oakland, California, that area. The time, what was going on at the time. I know at that time in my life, the Oakland Raiders were winning Super Bowls, and there was a mentality and a mindset that all of us inspired to be. Not
Mm-hmm.
just to be a Raider, but the mentality that we could win. You were just taught that it was
Hey,
part of the
interestingly
culture.
enough, dude, I was a New England Patriots fan, and I know who Jack Tatum was. I knew who Kenny
Oh
Stabler
yeah,
was. I know who Lyle Alzado was. Everyone did.
yeah.
Everyone did.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. And yeah, we've talked about this before too, right? Your movie genre, right? The movies that you watched. I think I've shared with you before. I watched Rocky. I think it was Rocky 1 at the time.
Yeah,
That changed my outlook in life.
yeah.
I can I could beat anybody, right? When you're losing, you come back and win. That's just it gets in your head. So that is a belief system.
Oh, yeah.
I think we've talked about the religious influence. So if you're Catholic, I know I grew up in a Catholic family, not a practicing Catholic. You are, so you can speak to that. But that clearly has a uh, impact on your belief system, your religious beliefs, whether you're practicing or
Yeah.
not. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we get shaped and polished later on, but I remember so many instances as a child where I would do something stupid like, drive my friend's grandmother's car at the age of 12 or grab onto somebody's bumper that when there was snow on the ground so we could bumper ski, get arrested. When I got caught, when I was growing up, when I got caught, I got punished,
Hmm.
you know. I was held accountable and I was
Yeah.
like if I ever said anything to my parents like that wasn't my fault or I didn't, they would just shut me up. They were like, stop right there. So I think personal accountability, as flawed as I am and as many mistakes as I've made in that space, it was just part of my life from a very young age. And I think that then you jump into sports, particularly team sports, is like
Mhm.
you got to know where to go, dude. If you don't show up ready to play, you don't get to come back, you
Yeah.
know?
But accountability is a really, really important part that you learn as a child. That's a hard one to learn later on in life.
It is.
Being accountable and not to blame others for your own doing. So yeah, and I think also your professional life, right? If you grew up in a corporate world that has a culture that has a belief system that you buy into early on, then that I think you carry that on to the rest of your life. Uh, And then I think this one's probably more than all of them combined, and that's the media exposure. So it depends what you're watching. It depends what channel you're watching, right? If you're watching Fox News versus I don't even know the other ones anymore.
Yeah,
MSNBC.
that's an interesting thing. Not to interrupt, Jim, but I was just talking to my girlfriend. As I told you earlier, I said, she asked me this past weekend if we could just go the weekend without watching any news, and I said
Hmm.
sure. And it wasn't a difficult thing for me to do. I agreed to it immediately, and I held my ground all weekend, and it was great. I mean, it was great for both of us. One of the things I noticed though, and maybe it was the absence of the news because didn't notice in the middle of it, is I can have the news on And if I'm hearing something that I've already heard, I don't hear it again. I can look out the window and I can see a bird. I can read a book. She can't not see it. She can't not hear it. So her only option, at least under current circumstances, is turn it off. I
Yeah.
can turn it off in my own head while it's on, and she can't.
Yeah.
And I think we're all different
Well,
that way.
I kind of disagree with you, Mark. I think you can turn it off, but those thoughts still are in your mind. You can't remove those thoughts from your mind. That's why I'm on by today's the 15th. So I've gone 15 days straight now without a single um, uh, video consumption of any mainstream media or anything, right? So and it's like anything else. Like you mentioned you changed up your drinking habits, right? It cleans your mind. The media will make you agitated and irritated, whether you're aware of it or not. That's this other thing we're talking about. The belief system. It's the conscious belief system and the unconscious belief system.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. No, it's valid. I mean, it's a valid consideration. I will tell you though that I think that there's probably I agree with you a little bit, and I'll stand my ground to some extent too, because I was telling her the story about my dad growing up in the kitchen. He had the newspaper in front of his face. He couldn't hear a fucking thing, you know.
yeah,
And you could yell, you could scream, you could say dad, 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 and then every once in a while the paper would come down and he'd look at you and he'd go, "Huh?"
yeah. Yeah, this is what's interesting too. Just explains the time that's at that time. That's where most people. I know my father the same way. He received his information by reading the paper,
That's right.
and he looked
That's
forward to
right.
getting home and yeah. So
Yeah.
and
No,
and I
our
just you could
belief.
say that at that time we were more united because there was one. Well, let's just say less sources of media um, that we could all maybe agree on things more compared to now, where it's twenty four
No, I think
seven.
you're right. I think you're 100% correct. I think our belief systems are being assaulted with information.
Oh, there's no
Assaulted.
doubt. Yeah. And the other one, and then we'll wrap up here is, yeah, our education background, right? I mean, I know you're a Notre Dame guy. That clearly is a belief system, right? You um,
Yeah.
probably also
Yeah.
a great
It's
experience, but it is a belief system of how the world um, should be or works. And
Well,
uh,
it's interesting that you bring that up, and that's probably a whole topic but we can wrap it up on that I've watched the University of Notre Dame since I matriculated there in 79 to today, and all these issues that we've been talking about and more, like, Black Lives Matter, DEI, green this, green that, left this, left that, inclusivity, all the left side stuff has been pushing into the university. And what it pushes up against is the Catholic doctrine. Like, you can't be Catholic and believe in
yeah,
abortion. You can believe in abortion if you want, but you
yeah,
can't be Catholic. And
yeah,
it's really interesting to watch an institution like that get attacked by the left. And they've not done a great job of sticking up for themselves, but it's shifting back now. And
yeah,
so
yeah,
that's a whole nother belief system circumstance.
yeah. So yeah, a lot of hypocrisy on both sides. So
Oh
anyway,
yeah.
Mark, hope hope you enjoyed that. We didn't get too much humor in there, but I think we tried. So,
Well,
and
listen, dude, you're in it. So good luck to you. Good luck to
yeah,
your family and friends. And hopefully all of you can stay out of the politics of it and just be safe. And maybe we can come out the other end and some
yeah,
smarter people than us can figure out how to
yeah,
make sure this
yeah.
never happens again.
We won't know for 5 years from now. It'll be at least 5 years before this thing plays out, or there's even a new home in those same lots. And
At
so,
least. At
at least,
least.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
all
All
right.
right, dude. Well,
Till next week.
yeah, talk to you then. Peace.
Peace.